ensayar rápido, no te sabes poner el pie. Lo ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner el pie.
We were having one of those off moments. I was actually asking Paul the existential question. Why? Welcome to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden. How are those cuts doing, Mark?
We will go off of civil discourse just for a second. I just used an expletive to tell Paul what he could do with himself. We are coming to you from Big Hat Books in Broad Ripple. That's a section of Indianapolis on the north side. Excellent selection of books, excellent facility. You can rent space here for special occasions. Our guests today are James Neese, Libertarian candidate, 89th District here in Indianapolis for State House. It covers Beech Grove, Irvington, and Warren Park. He has a website at jamesneese.webs.com. We also have with us Jeff Cox, a frequent guest of the show. Jeff, do you want to describe your website?
My blog is No Boxes Allowed. It's for liberal conservatives and conservative liberals and people who generally don't fit in any political party. It can be found at No Boxes Allowed with dashes in between the words .blogspot.com.
Okay, we're talking today about whether a declaration of war is necessary for the United States to engage in use of military force. And we had James had just addressed the point of the Vietnam War, and that Jeff had said we don't invade places. James said we do. I want to go to Vietnam as far as a topic. I'd like to go there someday just to visit, to see where Dien Bien Phu was fought. But
not the best hour for the French military.
No, that was on the Plain of Jars. When I was in college, a fraternity brother of mine was the son of the Minister of Propaganda for South Vietnam. His father got out of South Vietnam with something like $17 million in gold, was what he told us. He could be lying, I don't know, but he was not badly off. That was a really corrupt administration that was in the South. It was corrupt when we first started giving assistance to the French in the 1950s. There was nothing democratic or progressive or anything about the South any more or less than the North. And so when we sent people there, the main reason we sent people there was because corporations were going to be able to make money by selling helicopters to the U.S. military for use in Vietnam. They're going to sell oil. They were going to sell all these things that a military needs to function in a country. And that's why we were in Vietnam.
No, we were there for two reasons. Number one, domino theory, because North Vietnam was communist, and they were trying to spread their communism to Laos and Cambodia and other countries in Southeast Asia. That was their goal, their stated goal. Number two, Cam Ranh Bay. Cam Ranh Bay is near Saigon. It was a big naval base in World War II that the Japanese used as a staging area for their invasions of Malaysia, Singapore, and the western part of Indonesia. And if the Soviets had that as a base, they would be astride one of the major trading routes in the world in the South China Sea.
So you haven't read the Rand Corporation papers that were the subject of the Pentagon papers?
Does it matter?
Yes, it does, because most of the reasons that were publicly given for our involvement in Vietnam were disclosed in the Pentagon papers, which was why the government was so upset about Pete Ellsberg. Peter Ellsberg? Philip Ellsberg.
It doesn't sound right.
No.
That's in my list of cases in here.
But
actually.
No.
Daniel
Ellsberg.
Ellsberg.
Leaked the Pentagon papers to the New York Times. And that was why the government was so upset, because all the myths that we had about Vietnam, about why we were going over there, were disclosed. That was one reason John F. Kennedy didn't want to commit U.S. forces to Vietnam, because the Vietnamese people really didn't want to have war, and their culture was somewhat ambivalent to democratic leadership. Anyway, they viewed democratic leaders as being weak. And so it was a waste of our going over there, except for the corporations who were going to profit from it.
Well, so did Imperial Japan view Democrat leaders as weak. So did South Korea view Democrat leaders as weak. But right now, the South Koreans are pretty happy that we fought that Korean War and kept the Kim family out of South Korea, because today North Korea is hell on earth and South Korea is prosperous. And so what we had hoped to do was repeat in Vietnam what happened in South Korea. The South Korean governments at first, under Syngman Rhee, they were corrupt. But they've changed over the years. They've developed into a pretty responsive Republican-type system there.
Yeah, but let's look at the places where we have put troops. Vietnam, I'd say, was a failure. I mean, that was...
Yeah, it was a failure. I don't know that we should have committed troops there. I would have supported a proxy war.
Okay, so we sent them over our boats for war?
Well, if you go by the Lake County route, then you do the vote fraud.
No, I mean, we have somebody else do our fighting for us.
Yes, that happens all the time.
Well, I know, but we'd already had the French try to do it. What, we run somebody else in?
Yeah, we created you created a South Vietnamese army and have them fight.
Well, no, that's what we tried to do, but the South Vietnamese people that were doing it, the generals were kind of corrupt, and they just took the money and didn't want to fight.
Well, they would have beaten the North Vietnamese in 1975, except Congress cut off funding. So they were quite able to defend themselves.
You would have an issue, like when there is a nation that we want to topple because of ideology, be it a communist or a theological ideology that we just do not like, that we see as anti-progressive to ourselves. We tend to support reactionary revolutionaries that are within those countries. We go to whatever's the hardest, most brutal, most oppressive people that will fight this regime. Like we did that with Augusto Pinochet, and like we was like, well, we'll support you. We'll send our economists over here to help you with your government, whatever. Yeah, you did fine. It put the nation above there economically, but how many people died as a result of that?
And actually, economically, that country didn't really do all that well. It was a smaller percentage that did better, and most of the people didn't, and actually, eventually, were able to undo what the United States had done and get a democratically elected government.
Well, I think the issue with Pinochet was it did see improvement, especially in GDP, but the way he went about it was pretty much like, well, how are we going to fix the GDP? Well, let's just kind of execute the poor, and that'll solve the issue. So, like he was talking about like Vietnam, where it's going to spread to other places like Cambodia and what else. Well, regardless of communism was there, Cambodia still had Pol Pot. Like Pol Pot still was massacred people. That wasn't a communist regime. That was
a communist regime.
And it was in place only because we invaded Cambodia and overthrew Prince Sihanouk's government. And as a consequence, there was a vacuum. And so Pol Pot came in, and then there were executions.
No, Pol Pot chased Prince Sihanouk out of Phnom Penh.
No. We chased the Cambodian government out by invading in 1970.
And the other thing I would point out is that the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese were using Cambodia to move into Vietnam and thereby avoiding the interdiction efforts of the United States and the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. If Cambodia was allowing itself to be used as a staging area for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army, then there was every reason to invade them.
And there was every reason, because we weren't succeeding militarily, because we couldn't. As Barry Goldwater said, if we sent them there to win, we sent too few. If we sent them there to lose, we sent too many.
That's right.
And there was no way we could have won in Vietnam.
Unless we toppled the North Vietnamese government, which we weren't willing to do.
Well, we weren't willing to do that because then we would have had full war with China, and that gets down to the point of this. We had warfare. People were dying. Another aspect, and this is what we were talking about the other evening, is we had the draft then. Now we have an all-volunteer army. So does having the draft put an element of commitment of military forces on the line because all of a sudden everybody might have to go and serve?
I think people, congresswomen, would be less likely to vote to commit troops, and the president would be less likely to commit troops if the average population is going to have their sons and daughters go off to war.
Because if the average people are cool with it. If poor people only have a chance at college, or middle class people only have a chance at college anymore by serving in the military. But if it's their own kids, they do it.
When there's a draft, right now there's like 24 to 30% of like kids that are between the ages of 18 and 25 that are voting. When you have a draft and these people are forced to go, you just expand into a voting scene. That's why the voting age was 21. There's a big issue reducing to 18 because you'd serve like 3 years in Vietnam before you could even vote.
I remember that.
When you allow
they should lower the drinking age for that same reason too. You can fight for your country, but you can't have a beer. No,
I'm not saying the drinking age.
Well, I agree with you on that.
But when people are drafted, you galvanize an entire population that usually doesn't vote because they don't really care. And that's very threatening to politicians because politicians count on most of their voter base is usually between 60 and up or 40 to 55. That's their hardest voting base. And when you get all these young people to vote, that overwhelms that base. So these politicians are going to lose ground everywhere they go. They're going to remove these career politicians and put them in with younger people that are more anti-war than like the previous generation.
And just so just for the record, just so I want you to know that I'm consistent. I claimed conscientious objector status and got rejected during the Vietnam War. And I was in the draft. My number was 26. By that point, I think the draft that year went up to 2. So I made my point, but nobody was going to Canada except for sightseeing tours at that point. But I believe that if we are to have any kind of effective representation in this question, the more real war becomes for people, the less likely they are to be higgledy-piggledy saying, let's go to war.
And there's a psychological treatment that when people actually shoot guns at people, they tend to try to shoot away. Only a certain percentage of bullets actually hit their target in the warfare stance. So it's like people are psychology not wanting to kill each other. It's very hard.
It's hard to shoot a gun accurately.
No,
It's very hard.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. In a stressful situation, yeah, it is. To shoot it accurately, it's very hard.
But it's stressful. And when it's stressful, you think, like, do I really want to kill this person? Do I really?
I would want to kill them if they were trying to kill me.
Yeah,
they're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, but also, the accuracy of the firearm anymore is not a question because they're all automatic weapons. And so accuracy, all you have to do is just kind of like...
Yeah, but there's still the kick. There's still the kickback that reduces the accuracy in any firearm.
Yeah, but I really don't think that the accuracy of the firearms is questioned these days. I think that the technology is...
Well, no, I'm not questioning the accuracy of the firearm. I'm questioning the accuracy of the people firing them because it's hard. It's very difficult.
Okay, then, real quick, because we're getting towards the end. Is a declaration of war necessary for the U.S. to engage in use of military forces? Yes or no? Real simple.
No.
For long-term engagement, yes.
Yes.
I don't, because of the War Powers Act, I don't think it is necessary, but I think the War Powers Act is unconstitutional, so I think it is necessary. Should it be necessary?
Yes.
Should the Constitution be necessary or the War Powers Act?
Should the declaration of war be necessary in order for the United States to engage, except for attack against the United States?
Yes.
No.
There you got it. That's our vote. It's 3-1. This has been an interesting show this week. Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Whitehead.
We'll look for you next week when we'll be talking about methods of selection of judges in the United States. It should be fun. I don't know. We'll put duct tape across Paul's mouth. What do you think?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner bien.